All right, this was 57 years ago. It was the spring of 1956. It was the Democratic mock convention. Eisenhower was president, he was a Republican, so we had the Democrat convention. The keynote speaker was Alvin W. Barkley. He had been Vice President of the United States, he had been both junior and senior senator from the state of Kentucky, and he had been majority leader of the Senate. He tried to run for the nomination in '56. He obviously was not going to get it, so he ran for, in 1952, that's right, and he did not get the nomination. So later, I guess '54, he became the junior senator from Kentucky again. The dais was set up, as I remembered, right here in the center of the basketball court, and it stretched right across where the doors are, and of course, there was no door then. And the rest of the room was full of delegates, which were students. And then all the guests and I suppose other delegates filled the balcony. So the room was packed with people. The reason I was here, my uncle was the governor of Virginia, and his wife, that was Bont Stanley, his wife Ann Bassett Stanley was my father's sister. So I was a freshman. Instead of being a delegate, they asked me to be the liaison between the governor of Virginia and the university, being his nephew. And he came to introduce the keynote speaker, which was Alvin W. Barkley. And so I sat with the dignitaries up here as a liaison, and the governor was here. I think Mrs. Barkley was next to him. I'm trying to remember this correctly. My aunt was next to Mrs. Barkley, and I sat in the fourth seat, which would be about right here. So after he was introduced, he stood up to give the keynote speech. And he gave a dynamite speech. He was a wonderful speaker, and he was telling us about what all the Republicans had done wrong. We were all Democrats that day. We were clapping. It was excellent. Somewhere during the speech, he stopped. And have you ever been where you felt something was wrong? It didn't last long, maybe 10 seconds, but this room became absolutely stone quiet. And when it was perfectly still, he put his hands on the podium, as I remember. And these are the words I remember. He said, "I'd rather be a servant in the house of the Lord than sit in the seats of the mighty." And with that, he dropped down, his chin hit the podium, he went backwards, and he was dead. He died. He knew, in my opinion, he was having a heart attack. And he wanted to say that before he died. And of course, this whole room was a pandemonium. Everybody, we rushed up and they called for a doctor, all this, but Vice President Barkley was dead. And it happened right here in 1956.
It was very hot in this room?
Beg your pardon?
It was very hot, apparently. Was it?
It was in the spring, because back in those days, you didn't have the primaries like you have today. And really, the smoke-filled rooms were very much in effect. I mean, those were the guys who made the decision. So it was in the spring, and was this room hot? I don't know. It was full of people, so it could have been hot, yes. But it's not something I remember.
Was there some sort of general panic amongst the students, or just disbelief?
Well, it was hush. I mean, well, first, when he drops, everybody just goes like this. And then we ran up on the stage. My uncle ran up. They were looking for a doctor, and the doctor came up and all that. But by that time, this room had become very quiet, because I think everybody knew what they had just witnessed.
Did the convention continue after that?
You know, I thought about that the last few days when I found I was going to be televised or interviewed. And as I remember, we had a day or two pause. The university probably talked to Mrs. Barkley, because everything had been prepared. And I think she said, continue on with your convention, your mock convention. And I think we did. I don't think it was postponed over a day or two.
Do you recall, was there as much enthusiasm when it continued, or was a pall just sort of cast over the whole thing after that?
Wait a minute, I don't understand your question.
When the convention picked back up again, did it
Oh,
have-
oh, absolutely. That was a pall over the whole thing. I mean, we'd just gone through a very dramatic experience. And if I remember correctly, I think I'm right, we did elect Adlai Stevenson to be the Democratic candidate. But everything else was anticlimactic after that. I mean, you know, how you going to get over that? But I mean, I think that's exactly the words he said, because it's one of those times in life you would never forget what happened. And I just happened to be sitting on the front row since I was a young student and happened to know the governor.
Have you attended any mock conventions since then, or is that your only one?
I have not. I have not. In fact, this is the first time I think I've talked about it since then. But it was, it happened right there. You got it?
I think we got it, Bruce. Like I said, and I don't think we need to do the other thing. Thank you so much.
Oh, and everything. We got Mr. Murphy. She's on the platform with Doctor. Anyway, he dies, and we're all up there. I mean, I don't think we knew about CPR back in those days, any of that. And he was, you know, people feel things obviously dead. And I sat there, you know, I just sat in the chair and I looked, and there was Miss America to my right, and she was as white as that stripe right there. Well, when I get back to the fraternity house that night after the governor and my aunt left and went back to Richmond, and they had worked with Mrs. Barkley on any arrangements they had to have because of the state of Virginia, and they had called from Washington and said he would lie and stayed in the Capitol, yada, yada, yada. The fraternity brothers, you know what they wanted to know? What did Miss America say? So that was the first thing they
Now,
wanted to know.
Which fraternity was this, just so I know?
Big part?
What fraternity were you in?
KA.
KA. Okay.
Being a good old
Okay.
Southern boy.
Yeah,
you
I was
know.
gonna say KA or Beta Theta Pi. So.
Right. It's
yeah.
what did she say? And I said, I don't think she said very much, because I think she was in shock like everybody else was in shock. And I forgot who she was. She was a good-looking girl, obviously. And but I remember that. What did Miss America say? Okay.